Okay. Let's recap. Who remembers the etymology of science? It comes from the Latin word scientia, which means knowledge. We talked about in the traditional sense, not in the contemporary sense, that science simply means a discipline dedicated to knowing a particular subject matter. Any discipline. So in the traditional sense, any discipline dedicated to trying to understand a particular subject. If you want to know about studying life and living organisms, it's biology. If you want to know about studying nature, physis in Greek, physics, cooking, culinary. And we went down the list. Studying numbers, magnitudes is the science of mathematics in the traditional sense. So every discipline is a science, according to the ancients. All of those are studying particular subject matter. And so we talked about how there's a demarcation issue that comes up, that in defining a particular discipline or science, you must have the demarcation of what is allowed within that science and what's out of bounds. And so, remember, you can hold up your red card if people from culinary sciences start talking about quantum mechanics. There's an issue there. It doesn't work. Then we talked about, is there a universal science? If each science that we listed there is a particular science in virtue of saying, I want to study a particular subject matter, is there a universal science in which nothing's out of bounds? Anything could be studied within the science. What did we say? Philosophy. That's right, philosophy.
Professor, what's the definition of that? I can't see that part of that.
So we went science in the traditional sense. The etymology of that is scientia, S-C-I-E-N-T-I-A, which means in Latin, knowledge.
I didn't do that. Yeah.
Here, we just mean by science in the traditional sense, any discipline dedicated to knowing a particular subject matter. Okay. I know the screen gets in the way. And then you rightly pointed out, philosophy is considered to be a universal science. What we didn't cover in last class is quite important, is the etymology of philosophy. I think one of you in the first class brought this up, but it's derived from two Greek words, philia, Sophia. Now you've heard that word before. Like Philadelphia, the city of what? Brotherly love. So what does philia mean? Love. What is Sophia? Anybody know what Sophia means? A particular type of knowledge. Wisdom. Love of wisdom. What do you think the difference between knowledge and the type of knowledge that we call wisdom? Experience? What does experience bring us? And can experience just bring us any type of knowledge? There's something about wisdom being considered the highest type of knowledge. objective. Think about every discipline that we could list up there: biology, sociology, anthropology, culinary, engineering, medicine, law. All of those are giving us knowledge, but they're not giving us wisdom. What's the difference?
I mean, if we were to say who's called an older person why because they've experienced it, these are lessons that they've learned, I think they've learned.
Okay. But can't you experience, what if somebody's very experienced in, it goes farther than experience. You're right, I'm trying to push you even farther. So it's something about philosophy that you already pointed out is different from all the other sciences. Is it particular? Let me give you an example. Do you know what an idiot savant is?
But if we pick up anything, or someone that they're specializing in that having practice or study, they could pick up a piano song without having to practice just by hearing it.
Sort of. How many of you have seen Rain Man? Dustin Hoffman. That's an idiot savant. So they're idiot, we know what that means. We were just talking about idiot, slow-loose. So they're actually, and what does savant mean? Savant means genius. So you have these two terms brought together, idiot and genius, all in one. And so you get sort of people like the Rain Man that are an idiot savant that are absolutely a genius, maybe in music or mathematics. So do you remember the scene where your man, Tom Cruise, the young Tom Cruise, drops a bunch of, I think it was toothpicks, and Rain Man's 356, and he like counts them all, but he can't tell you, he can't do anything else. So he's a genius in one area. And now, is that wisdom? It's knowledge, but is it wisdom? Would you say that Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman, is, wow, wise, what a wise man. That's something that I want to be. No, it's a deficiency. We might admire the ability to do exceptional mathematics and counting that we couldn't do, or music or something like that, but we don't envy him in the other ways because it's a form of being mentally handicapped. They can't do those things. And so that's why we say savant. So we wouldn't say wise, but a wise person, like you said, an old person that has experienced, you ask your old grandfather, they know how to build a car, rebuild the engine, they know how to do electronics, carpentry.
And wisdom is applicable for like practical use.
Could be. Yeah, go farther.
Which means everything's connected in a way.
It has to do with the whole. So it's not, remember, the idiot savant knows something very, very well, but very, very narrow particular area. The wise man knows all the different parts. So philosophy is universal. That's why it's a type of knowledge, but it's the knowledge, it's the highest type of knowledge, wisdom, because it includes all things. So you're absolutely right to be able to, and this is really the idea of the Renaissance man or woman, that they learn all the disciplines and see how, well, that is philosophy, how it all works together. And so that's why we call philosophy a universal science. Etymology, philia sophia, philos sophia. The definition of philosophy, who remembers that?
The science of all things human and good.
Good. Science of all things humanly knowable. We gave another one too that I will accept.
Science of thinking correctly about all things.
We talked about, oftentimes philosophy is, the word philosophy is synonymous with thinking. In that case, you're all philosophers. So if anybody ever tells you, oh, I took a philosophy class, I hated it, you know how you respond? You want to be sarcastic? Oh, that's a wonderful philosophy. Can I join your cult? You can't get out of it. It's like saying, let me show you that I've never spoken a word in my life. It's like, you can't do that. You just contradicted it. You just spoke. So if somebody says, I don't like philosophy. Yes, you do. That's your philosophy. It's synonymous with thinking. You can't get out of it. Now, we're all philosophers. Some of us are better at it than others. And we all come in as novices, and we try to learn from the masters. So this is the masters who we're reading. And we learn from that, and we start to learn to think better. And we talked about one thing only? No, about all things. That's why it's such a marketable degree to get and to study. Is once you learn how to think well in all things, then you're not limited anymore. Which is the very notion of the liberal education. Libra, not book, but freedom. That you become free when you learn all these things. Who's ever read the book or seen the movie, The Count of Monte Cristo? How many people have eaten a Monte Cristo? See? Or smoked a Monte Cristo? Okay. So, this is Alexander Dumas' book, and it's quite amazing. So in the movie, starring Jim Caviezel, he's this peasant. Back in the day, peasants, only people who had enough money would have enough time to have what we call leisure. They weren't concerned, oh, I've got to go work today, so no, they had enough money. It was people like that that were able to go to school. Because mostly people were thinking about how am I going to get food on my dinner table and provide for my family. That was primarily the concern of people. And so somebody like Jim Caviezel's character would not have had the luxury or liberty to actually get an education. He's wrongly framed. He's in love with this girl, and it goes awry, and he gets locked up in this horrendous prison. And there he meets a priest, and this priest is trying to escape, and Jim Caviezel wants help, Jim Caviezel's character, and the priest says, let's make a deal. I will teach you the great books, the 7 traditional liberal arts, teach you how to read, write, learn economics, philosophy, theology, science, and you will help me escape. And so what happens is this really amazing contrast. Are you free in a prison? Yet he's the freest man alive when he starts learning these things. That's an amazing literary contrast, to be able to put somebody who's becoming the free man in a place where they've taken away all your freedom. They cannot take away your knowledge. And it's your knowledge that's going to make you free. And that's exactly what happens. He applies his knowledge, he gets out, escapes, becomes physically free, and then finds this hidden treasure that was the priest told him about, and becomes wealthy beyond anybody's imagination, and he becomes and reinvents himself as the Count of Monte Cristo, gets the girl, but it's all about revenge. Is he's got to get this guy that framed him. Now you're going to go watch the movie, aren't you? But I like that illustration. That there you go, learning all the various disciplines in the context of philosophy makes you free. It enables you to do anything, empowers you. So philosophy, the science of all things humanly knowable, or the science of thinking correctly about all things. Questions?
When you think about something correctly, people think differently. You come from different backgrounds and different experiences, so what's thinking correctly about something?
Is that just like morally then? Thinking morally correct?
What are you going to say? Well, this gets back to the question of why it was so important to make the distinction between subjectivity and objectivity. And also the difference between thinking that you know something versus actually knowing it. Big difference, yes?
Not necessarily like thinking correctly, but going through the process of identifying what is correct.
Yeah, there's kind of these first things first. That first you want to get, how do I think correctly? The methodology. Well, you use logic. And I can teach you a little bit of that. And in fact, in your book, that's something very nice that you should read. It's called the Logical Toolkit. These are the rules, the objective rules of thought that every discipline, every person assumes whether they know it or not. Some of those are called the law of identity. The law of identity states A equals A. Well, what does that mean? Well, it establishes meaning. So when I say pen, P-E-N, then what that means, every time that you see that word in order to establish meaning, it means pen. So pen means pen. Because can you imagine if that every time that you saw that word, it took on a different meaning? It now means door, desk, dog, car. You couldn't have any conversation. So it's quite important to have, I'm going to write this up for you. Three fundamental laws of thought. Law of identity. A equals A. So when you see the word apple, it means apple. It's sort of like the substitution method. Anytime you see the word apple, you know that it's going to mean apple. That establishes meaning. So whether we know it or not, the very fact that we're having conversation, meaningful conversation, implies these fundamental rules of thought. The next one that follows is called the law of exclude the middle. In other words, there's no middle option in this scenario. Something is either A, and that tilde means not. Something either is, let's see, if I pull this an apple, what immediately follows? If an apple means apple, then what immediately follows is the law of exclude the middle. Then either what you're holding in your hand is an apple or it's not an apple. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Now that doesn't mean that everything in life can be carved up into a binary that, well, it's either a good school or it's not a good school. Well, that's something different. We're talking about the identity. So notice, because I'm attributing an adjective or a predicate to the school is either good or it's not good. Well, no, sometimes you can have a bit of both. But when it comes to identity, what you couldn't say is, this is a school and it's not a school. That doesn't make any sense. And that's why the third law follows from this. And it's called the law of non-contradiction. Something can't be both A and not A. And we need a caveat here, an addendum, at the same time and same way of speaking. So it might be true to say, this is a dog and it's not a dog. But it would be a contradiction, for example, to say that it's a dog and not a dog at the very same time. And by dog, I mean the same in both senses. Well, How is it by saying it's a dog and not a dog without adding the addendums would not be a contradiction? Well, 500 years from now, it's not going to be a dog. It's going to be dead. It's like saying it's a dog right now, but in 500 years, it's not going to be. That's not a contradiction. But to say right now, at this time, it's both a dog and not a dog, that doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction. Here's one, I'm going to trick you. This sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. Please explain to me why it's not. This is a bat, and it's not a bat at the same time.
Double meaning of the word bat.
Yes. Double meaning is called equivocation. So, it's a bat in the sense of hitting balls. It's not a bat in the sense of a blind flying mammal using sonar. Good. Nice one. What you did right there is very nice philosophy, making distinctions. And when we get to Heraclitus, we'll actually be able to see where these sorts of things arise from. Yes, sir. Right there. Yeah, equivocation. Do you want me to break down the etymology for you? Yeah, you guys are going to get so much etymology from this class. The difference between uni, like a unibrow, is what? One. This man has one eyebrow. He's in one eye. He's a cyclops. Eque, many. In Latin, voces. What is voces? Voice. Yeah. Many voiced. Equivocal. Many meaning, or multiple meanings. Of a single word. Univocal would be a single, yes. Now watch how you can't get out of this. Let's suppose somebody says, I don't assume any of those three laws of thought. I'm not buying it. Well, play this game with them. Ask them, what three laws are we talking about? This? No, that's a this? No, that's a desk. So, by the three laws of thought that you want to deny that exist or that you're using, you mean the three laws of thought? Yes? Okay, bam, we got one. We got the lie. By the three laws of thought, we mean the three laws of thought? Yes. Okay, you've already got one down. And by the three laws of thought, we mean we're either talking about the three laws of thought or we're not? Yes. Okay, number two. And by the three laws of thought, you're telling me that we're talking about something, three laws of thought. They couldn't be both the three laws of thought and not the three laws of thought at the same time in the same way? Yes. Okay, well, then you just stultified yourself, made yourself an idiot. Stupid. Yeah, you refuted them. See how easy it is to refute people? And you just learn a few techniques. Well, isn't sports like that? How many people play sports? Okay. Now, there's always going to be somebody that has more brute strength. And how in sports does one combat somebody that might be stronger? Skill and technique. That's right. And so I will teach you the skills and techniques. Look, we're always going to find somebody that knows more than us, that's smarter. But you can go toe-to-toe with the very best of them if you just learn a few simple techniques that you can apply, and you get to take down these big giants. Sound good? Okay, so going back to, it's things like this that if we use the methodology, we make the proper distinctions, we don't make hasty generalizations, that all things being considered, all things being equal, you should get to the correct answer, objective answer. And that's why it was important to make the distinction between objective and subjective. Subjective being opinion, objective being fact. Subjective being observer dependent. So we can't have things tasting good unless there's people tasting. Facts are observer independent. So that means when we're looking for facts and truth, it really doesn't matter how many people say different things. It's irrelevant. And if they're all saying different things, they're all wrong. Just like that's why we took a very clear example we could all agree with. 2 + 2 = 4. We're all going to assume that's objective fact. Just because different people would believe something different does not change the truth value of that statement. Why? Because the truth value of that statement is not dependent on us. The existence of the sun, is that dependent upon what we believe? We believe something, is it going to disappear or change? No. Why? Because it's an objective fact. It's independent of us. And this is what philosophy aims at achieving. Science does too. No doubt there. That it's trying to obtain and discover truths that are not dependent on, not something that we make up, not dependent on what we believe. And so if people believe there is no sun, if there's a culture or people that believe that, well, then they're objectively wrong. Now, somebody brought up morality. This is why it's so important to, when it comes to theories of truth, we can basically narrow it down to 3 theories of truth that people believe. Okay. It's nice they left this up for us. True. Is it true or is it true?
True.
Theories of truth. Doesn't it sound like a new book or something? Read Dad Brown's Theories of Truth. Buy his book. Subjectivism. Relativism. And objectivism. Number 1 and number 2 will share something in common. And what they share in common is the belief that there are no objective absolute truths that are true for all people, cultures, at all times, in all places. Relativism will be ascribing to the same thing. The only difference is subjectivism. If you ask somebody, okay, there are no absolute objective truths that are true for all people, cultures, at all places, at all times, then what is true? They would say, whatever you believe is true. How many people have heard that? It's all perspective. Because this person thinks that this is true and this person thinks that. For them, it is true. That means if you ascribe to that, you're a subjectivist. Now, there might be some issues with that. Because you might say, well, then how does law work? Would that fly in the face of a judge? Your Honor, for me, this is true. For you, maybe something different. For me right now, that I doubt that's going to fly. So you might want to move up and say, well, look, I'm not going to go so far as to say it's objective. But let's say it's relative. There are no objective absolute truths that are true for all people. For all people. Cultures at all times, at all places. But I'm not going to go so far as that each person makes up what is true. You might say, no, it's your culture, it's your time and place, it's the societal laws that all come together. And so truth is relative to your culture, place, and time. So we couldn't go to Spain and start trying to go, you're guilty of tax code law 3, U.S. tax code law 3198. They would say, you're crazy. This is Spain, not the United States. You can't apply U.S. law to Spanish law. Why? Because it's relative. Or, better yet, now in our culture, it's probably taboo to go to school and work with no clothes on, correct? In fact, you're going to go to jail if you do something like that.
It depends on the cop, actually.
Really?
Yeah, some cops don't care.
Yeah, well, what is it? What are your what is your employers and your coworkers going to think, though?
There's a homeless guy that lives by my house, and he has a whole tent set up and everything, and the cops won't even touch it. Go in it.
But I'm saying within the culture as a whole that we live in, it's frowned upon to come to work or school naked. Now, what about if you're in an Amazonian tribe? It's all good. Yeah, it's too hot for clothes. Well, we couldn't go over there and say, shame, shame, shame on you. Not wearing, why aren't you wearing Calvin Klein, you dummies? You can't say that kind of stuff.
I heard in some part of the world, there's an unincorporated tribe, and they were just walking around with barely any clothing, just made of animals, birds.
Absolutely, there's tons of them.
In Brazil, I think.
Yeah, Brazil.
And
Papua New
they
Guinea.
just leave them alone. No one really bothers them.
There's one tribe that it has had no contact with the modern world, and it doesn't desire it. In fact, I think there was a big earthquake or something like that, and they went to go see if they're okay. And they're flying over the hill, and they were sitting there with the spears getting ready, and they're like, yeah, that means not welcome. Yeah, we're all good. We got our spears. We're not dead. But you will be if you come. Yeah. That's quite amazing that they make a conscious choice. We will not embrace modernity. We will kill you. Yeah, if you try to force that on us. So that might lead somebody to think, well, that's because truth, no, it's not subjective, but it's relative to the culture and place and time that you live in. So you can't apply cultural truths to another culture objectively, because then you have issues with the natives and Amazonians in Brazil. Brazil.
It's funny, I'm from Brazil, and then I used to live there.
Você fala português?
Eu falo português.
Tudo bem?
Tudo bom com você? Yeah, but
Muito legal.
it was, I think, 2009. There's tourists somewhere in Brazil. They were kind of just going through the forest, and then they went where those people were, where they kind of weren't clothes in their can, and they killed them. And then the news try to get there, because they want to get some content, and they're like, if you get here, we'll kill you too.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Yeah,
Where in Brazil are you from?
Rio.
Heel.
Yeah, me too.
Huck and Hole. They don't pronounce their R, their R's are H's, right? You like Huck and Hole? Brazil's amazing. You know what's really amazing in Brazil? Fortaleza.
You really?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time in Brazil when I was younger. So objectivism. Now objectivism is going to contradict these two. It's going to say truth itself is objective, and maybe not every single thing is objective. For example, pad thai was the best tasting. We said pad thai is the best tasting food in the universe. Well, clearly that can't be objective. So, but objectivism doesn't say everything has to be black and white in that way. It's saying no, the nature of truth is objective, but there are some things that are objectively and universally true for all people. And cultures at all times. Now, do you see how you can't hold number 1 or 2 with number 3? You can't say there are no objective absolute truths and then say, yes, there are some. That's a contradiction. Now, I want you to look at number 1 and 2. By the way, let me just rewind real quick. Do you remember, if any of you have taken tests for the SAT, process of elimination? So when you're doing multiple choice, it's either A, B, C, or D. And what do you try to do? Eliminate? Okay, it can't be D, can't be B. So it's between A or C, and then you find out it can't be A. Then what's left? Yeah, that's a methodology for obtaining objective truth. There are no other possibilities. If those, you've exhausted that, those are truly the only 4 possibilities, then if you eliminate all others, then by process of elimination, you know that the right answer must be C. Well, we can do the same here. All 3 cannot be true, just like we were saying, if every person was giving a different answer to 2 plus 2, well, maybe nobody has the right answer, but what is the first thing that you'll know? Can they all be true? Can everybody be true in their own way? No, that's silly. We know that at the very least, not all of us can be. Maybe some people got it right, but if everybody's getting, at least one person going to get it right. But if everybody's getting a different answer, we know everybody cannot be right at the same time. So likewise, we can't hold all 3 of these at the same time, so we have to eliminate. Well, how are we going to eliminate? We look for contradictions or inconsistencies, as somebody pointed out last class. Does anything strike you odd just grammatically or logically about the statement, there are no absolute objective truths that are true for all people at all times?
That would make that statement universally true.
Yeah. True or false? Now, when you say something, if I say there's a book here, I'm intending for that to be true, unless I'm trying to deceive you, is my intention. But what you're hearing is always, well, their meaning for that to be true, or the statement of there is no book here. Well, you know, that person is contradicting themselves, because at one point they're trying to say there is a book here and there isn't a book here, which is a contradiction. So if somebody says there is no truth, true or false, what do you think they mean by that? Well, is that a lie? That's like the famous, if everything's a lie, then is what I'm saying a lie? So then it's the truth. There's a famous paradox. All Cretans, so Cretan comes from the island of Crete. All Cretans are liars. Yeah, you just refuted yourself. Because you're a Cretan and, oh, you want a riddle? It ties up this. Okay. There's a town of truth tellers and a town of knaves. Knaves means liars. And you get at the crossroads. And you don't know where the town is. But by the process of 1 minute, I'm going to throw this chair out of the trip over. You're at the crossroads, and so you know that, well, one direction is going to go to the town of truth tellers, and the other one's going to go to the town of liars. And the town of liars, all they do is tell lies. They can never tell the truth. The town of truth tellers, they can never lie. They can only tell the truth. You run into somebody who's coming from one of those towns, obviously. You don't know which town's which. You just know that there's those two options. There is one question that you could ask about where they're from that will reveal their true identity. Now you can see the problem if you ask them, are you from the town of liars? Well, is that going to help? No. The town of liars are going to, nope, I'm not from the town of liars. You're mistaken. The truth teller is going to say, I'm not from the town of liars, so that's not going to help you. And it has to be about the town. You can't ask them, are you a tree frog? You can't do that. That's too. Then it wouldn't be a riddle.
Is the other town the town of liars?
What other town? See what I mean? You don't know which town, but you're getting close. You're getting close to something.
Our goal is to get to the town of like people that tell the truth, right?
You want to know where this guy came from. Now you don't know if this is the town of truth tellers or the town of knaves. You know he's coming from one or two. You want to know if he is from the town of truth tellers or the town of liars. So there's a question you can ask him about where he's from that will reveal his true identity.
Will someone from the other town say that you're a liar?
You're getting close. Now, just translate that into. Man, you're so close. Translate that into not about another person, about the person you're talking to yourself. Getting close. So about his town. So start with the conditional. If you were. What town?
What town would that be at?
What town would you tell me you're from? So let's assume he's a liar. Mentiroso. And he tells mentiras. And you ask him, if you were from the town of liars, what town? Let's do it the other way around. This will be easier. Let's assume he's the truth teller. See what happens. So you ask him, if you were from the town of liars, what town would you tell me you're from? Now, the truth teller has to always tell the truth. So he has to imagine, if I were a liar, I'm going to be truthful about this to you. I would tell you I was, would you say I'm from the town of liars? Would the liar say that? No. So the truth teller says, if I was a liar, I'd tell you I was from the town of truth tellers, thereby revealing his true identity. The opposite of truth is a lie. So the liar is always going to say the opposite of what a truth teller would say. So if it ends up he's the liar, he's going to say the opposite of whatever the truth teller said, which is what? I'm from the town of, if I were from the town of liars, I would, you can't speak the truth and say, I tell you I was from the town of truth tellers, he would have to lie. He always lies. So he'd have to say, I'm from the town of liars, thereby revealing his true identity. Give that to the kids. You like riddles? So, the truth and lies are contradictory. You can't have, so if somebody says, I don't exist, no, you're a liar. Because who is saying that? I am. The I that doesn't exist. Okay, dummy, out of here. Yeah, not allowed. Okay? So, going back to your question, reiterate your question again. Do you remember? If everything... Can you help me? Do you remember what it was?
Your question?
Yes.
If we all come from different backgrounds.
How can you think correctly? You come from different backgrounds.
Okay. So one way is to figure out if we all come from different backgrounds, either we think that truth is subjective, that I make what's true. Now that probably breaks down real quick when you're getting punched in the face and your wallets don't. Because you're going to have to go, well, I guess that's true for them. For me it hurts, but people aren't going to want to. You can't live that out consistently. You cannot live subjectivism out consistently. Because you're going to think that there's something objectively wrong. Or if I just randomly assign you grades by rolling dice, you'd say that's not fair. I'd be like, that's your opinion. My opinion is, nobody's going to tolerate that. I guarantee you're not going to let me do that.
You're going to the dean with that one.
Yeah, you're going to go to the dean on that one. So you might say, okay, I'm not going to go that far, but it is relative. So our culture thinks that you can't do that. That's against the rules, and you'd be wrong. Wrong, I tell you. Okay, what possible problems? Well, we already identified both of them share. There are no objective truths. True for all people at all times. When somebody says that, they're intending that just to be for them or their culture. They're intending that to be objectively true. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say there are no objective truths, but I'm going to tell you an objective truth. You can't be a Cretan and say all Cretans are liars and that be a true statement. Self-refuting. So we know by, and look what we applied. We applied methodology by simply using the three fundamental laws of thought. We are able to eliminate two options, which leaves us with the third option. Truth must be objective. In other words, the very nature of truth is not made up. Is truth defined by a vote? We just think about how bad that could be. What race actually constitutes as being a human being? Would you like to rely on a vote? Be like, well, the truth of the matter is, let's take a vote. Nobody would. That would be absurd. We believe that that's objectively true, and this is why the Founding Fathers even write it in the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights. Inalienable means what? You cannot take away, not even by a matter of a vote. You can't be, oh, well, we'll vote it out. You can't do that. That's because they believed in objective truth. Which leads me to my next point. We're talking about this philosophically and logically. Can anybody see any potential moral problems that have arisen in history by cultures or societies adopting subjectivism or relativism?
Pretty much any culture that's had like a hierarchy, being a caste system, more important to a person based on like skin color or what they're born.
Think particular atrocities. You're getting to.
I mean, they're being genocide, Holocaust. There's a lot of examples, unfortunately.
Yes. What's interesting is this even came up with the Nazis. So, do you know how law works? It works by something called precedent. So, judges can't just go, well, look at the case, and my opinion is that, no, a precedent's established, and so you'll say, well, according to Smith versus the state of California in 1962, that becomes the principle by which you judge all the individual cases. Now, the problem is, after the Allies won the war, and they wanted to prosecute the Nazis or the SS officers for war crimes, they couldn't use precedent. Why? It was unprecedented. There was no world court or international law established. And you can't be like, well, according to the UK law, they're going to say, not our law. You can't come and apply UK or US or French law to. So, what did they do? Yeah, they did. It came out of that in the Geneva Convention, the Hague and stuff like that. But do you know what the Nazis were actually saying when they tried to prosecute them?
They were using the Nuremberg defense.
Yeah.
Just following orders.
They were saying, in our culture, this is what's true. How dare you come in and tell us what we can think and what? How intolerant. How intolerant of you to come in and judge us and to, according to our culture, this is the way we see things. And we would be breaking the law and go to, exactly, we would go to, we have to follow orders. So they're appealing to relativism. Now, does that sit okay with you? Would you be like, well, I guess they're right, because everything's relative. Do you see what kind of sticky problems you can get yourself into if you ascribe? Now, this is being pushed on us in every form of media in our culture, that do whatever you want. You make up what's true. But you can't live that consistently, because you know that when your professor randomly generates grades, you feel that something's objectively wrong. Or if a culture or race is committing genocide on another, there's something in your heart and intuition that tells you that cannot be just true according to them. There's something objectively wrong about that.
But that would be a moral, right? That would be your moral.
That's a moral truth, yeah. So I switched gears from, we had illustrations, for example, if everybody has different opinions of whether it's the sun or the answer to 2 + 2, well, we would know that it doesn't matter what you think. If your mind does not line up with what's actually out there in reality, then you're a dummy and you got it wrong. Now that might sound offensive, but think about if any of you have kids, and this is always people like to play philosophical and be like, oh, I wouldn't, everything's relative and subjective. Really, do you raise your kids that way? Your 5-year-old says, I'm going to take up smoking and heroin. Sure. It's all relative. For you, that might be a good fit. No parent would. See, that's where I always like to test people's ideas. Why? Because you love your children. Parents love they ought to love their children, and so that's a great litmus test for ideas. Would you do that too? Would you practice that type of ideology? Would you teach your children that? You can do whatever you want. No, because doing whatever they want would hurt them. So if we love people, if we have love for our fellow man, we're not going to say, yeah, whatever you think is true is true. That's not loving. People are going to get hurt. People do get hurt. There's genocide. In fact, that's exactly what the prosecutors argued. They did this exact thing in Nuremberg. They argued that these are contradictory systems. You cannot actually say that without contradicting yourself, and then by definition it's false. Neither can you practice it. And I encourage you, don't buy into an idea unless you can practice and live it. Because when you can't, we all know what that's called, hypocrisy. Right? Listen to what I'm saying, but don't do what I'm doing.
Wouldn't that fall into common sense? For example, There's parents that let their kids drink in the house because it's a safer environment to drink home than to go out and drink. So for them, that's the truth, and they love their kids, so that's why they're allowing their kids to drink.
But does it make it right? Of course, there's very few people, I think, that ascribe to something that it actually thinks wrong. Do you know anybody that will actually believe something that I know this is wrong and false and not true, but I'm going to believe it anyways? Now, everybody believes that what they're believing in is true, but does that make it true? We're not in the land of make-believe. We can't just believe things into reality and existence. So that's why they would go to jail. The courts would actually, they don't care what you depend. I mean, think about it. We go into court, and that's exactly. Well, for me, I thought this was, the judge is going to say, I don't care what you thought. The objective reality is it's illegal, it's wrong, it's harmful, you can't do it, and you're going to be fined or you're going to go to jail.
Can you like pronounce somebody that's crazy if they do that? Like, oh, the government told me to do that. Like, I think I saw something like this lady ran over somebody with a double something, and like they pronounced her crazy.
Yeah, so a legal case that would excuse you, insanity in law doesn't mean probably what you think it means, because you could be all kinds of crazy people. Most people sentenced to jail are crazy, but they're sentenced to. You would have to show, and it's a very high standard to be able to show this, at that particular time, the type of craziness you had made it such that you could not distinguish between right and wrong. That's a very hard thing to. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to be prosecuted, because in law, you know the whole Lady Justice, and she has the scales. The idea is that whatever crime or harm that's been committed, it has to be rectified. Somebody's going to pay. That even means if you didn't even have the intention to kill somebody, but you did something that was a mistake. Let's say your CD fell on the ground while you're driving, you pick it up and you run over somebody. You're going to jail. You're going to jail for manslaughter. But you say, but I didn't mean to. Doesn't matter. Somebody was killed and somebody has to pay. And you were the first in the causal chain. So you're going to. And it's exactly why in law we make the distinctions between manslaughter, third degree, second degree, and first degree murder. What's the difference?
Manslaughter, accident. First degree murder is with intent.
Second degree intent too, but it could be like, yeah, you come in and I find you with my wife and I lose it and I kill. Okay, but I didn't plan. Now, if I'd set it up, and I've been setting it up for like 3 months, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get them. Well, if you're going to get first degree murder, because think about all the opportunities that you have while planning that out to get out and be like, this is crazy, I can't do this. So when you continue that line of reasoning and it eventually leads to the crime, yeah, you're going to get sentenced. A lot harsher sentence than if it was a crime of passion.
So when you say that there are certain things that are objectively immoral, doesn't that come from how we were raised as a society? Wouldn't that be relative to our environment?
It could be, but what if that society was correct?
Incorrect or?
No, correct. What if the society you were brought in, because are you saying you can never learn anything true from your society?
Well, no, but how would we know that's true? That's my question. How have we established that what we know is true? More.
Well, you have to find things that are objective, that aren't made up by culture. For example, are the laws of logic made up? If you erased everybody from the universe, would those cease being true? No. If you erased everybody from the planet, would the statement there is a sun orbiting Earth be false? Now, you might learn that from your culture. So what we're making the distinction is, how do I come to know something versus what makes something actually objectively true? What makes something objectively true? 2 + 2 = 4. There's a sum. It is not dependent on anybody or anybody's culture. How you know that? Well, you're going to need your culture. Don't you need to learn a language? Don't you need to learn how to think properly and stuff like that? Can it go wrong? Absolutely. Do you see why this is so difficult, though? Because there's so much false information within culture that we're brought up, it's very difficult to be able to parse out. It's not clear like mathematics. It's very difficult to parse out, well, what was I told that was wrong and what's right? That's why we gave you an objective methodology. I gave you some objective rules that exist just as true as the law of gravity or the sun existing, that if you apply consistently, then you will arrive at the objective truth. And you have to learn that from your culture, but your culture doesn't make that true. So do you see the distinction? How do I come to learn something versus what makes something actually true? That's a very, and we're just going to keep making these great. It's a great question. Yeah. And other questions about, and it gets difficult. It gets difficult when you involve values and different experiences and stuff like that, because there's more factors to consider. You don't have to consider that when doing a mathematical proof. Well, how does the culture about, how does this religion play into? You don't have to think about that. So all those complications are thrown out, so you can just look at, well, for example, how does mathematics come to objective conclusions? It uses logic. So if I teach you logic, which is going to come from your culture, particularly your culture at Fullerton in this class, you can use that to get something that doesn't come from your culture, an objective truth that exists out in the universe. And that's the goal. Can we go wrong? We go wrong all the time. But is that enough to go, well, I've been wrong a couple times, so I'm just giving up? There is nothing true. Well, no, because it can't say that. Well, is that true? You never get out of that conundrum. So the only option that we have is, there are some things that are objectively true, and that would apply to morality as well. Because if we say it's all relative, morally speaking, then the Nazis are right. How do we condemn them? They're saying this is our culture. We were brought up this way. For us, this is true. For you, it's... And so they had to argue for something called natural law. That doesn't mean, well, look at nature and see how we're supposed to behave, because nature is not the best. It's like, wow, that tiger's tearing apart that little rabbit. I guess I should do that. No, you should not do that. It means things have natures, intrinsic essences that make something be what it is. Notice it's even written into the Declaration of Independence. All men are created, and doesn't mean man, but what? Human. Yeah, it's short for human. He-Man and She-Ra. You grew up with He-Man. Yeah, that's right, the powered gray skull. I had the gray skull when I was a kid. You had a little castle and had like trapdoors and stuff. What's that?
You have it in good condition. That's pretty
I
good.
know. Don't even get me started on all the toys that would be worth tons of money if I kept them. But that's such a weird thing, because if you think that way about everything, then you just become a hoarder. Well, yeah, I need that. Well, probably need it. Could.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But you never get rid of anything. Somebody make a drone fly. Piss him off the professor. Check this out. They already have it. What am I talking about? Okay, any further questions about that? And then we can move. So we did a review. We saw how this was able to relate to truth, the laws of logic, some methodology that we can apply. We'll do more of this, but I just wanted to cover it. Okay. The Presocratics. So I had mentioned that once in a blue moon, maybe every 300 years or so, you get these geniuses. Now, how many people know anything about psychology, IQ tests and things like this? So, for you to be in college, you probably have a minimum of 115, 120, at the very minimum. Now, if you go to if you're able to get into grad school, that goes up a bit. It's 120, 130. PhDs start going up higher. So once you get a doctorate, you're at the top percent, couple percent of society in IQ points. There are those giant intellectual giants that come around once in a blue moon. They're not even on the chart. They're off the scale. So can you think of anybody that might be like that?
I just like programming with people.
Yeah, he's probably an AI. He's probably a machine. Yeah, he's programs. I'm not a fan of Elon Musk at all. Tesla, I like Tesla.
I'm gonna go with Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking? Yeah. Jesus? Socrates? Einstein? Newton?
I think about that.
Oh, alive. Stephen Hawking alive?
That's it.
Yes, these are intellectual giants who are not on the scale at all. They're off the charts. And they're the sort of people that when they come and they give us their creations, it changes the whole world in human history. The Presocratics are like that. And remember, I told you, they're coming in at a time where there was no philosophy or science. Everything was in terms of mythology. Mythology comes from the word mythos, meaning story. And that's going to be contrasted to something called logos, reason, rational thought or speech. And what we have here, when the Presocratics come in, we have a break from the myth, and we call it the Greek miracle. Because it's miraculous insofar as if you were to look prior to the 6th, 7th century BC, there are probably no indications that what was about to happen was going to happen. And what was about to happen happened. And what happened was science, philosophy, democracy, all this huge human flourishing that came out of. How was that possible? Well, first we have to understand what was it like to be in the age of mythology. So, in the age of mythology, in ancient Greece, you have people like Homer. And Homer wrote 2 famous works. The Iliad and the Odyssey. And in the Odyssey, it begins with the line, "Oh, sing." Do you remember this? He's referencing the muse. What's a muse? Inspiration. But it's even more than inspiration. The ancient Greeks in mythology, so when Homer's writing this, he doesn't believe that he's writing this. When the poets write what they're writing, they believe they're a mouthpiece. A mouthpiece for whom? The gods.
It's just like some Mormon stuff, like Joseph Smith.
Yeah. Joseph Smith in Magic Glasses, that's right. So, there was a real kind of deterministic world. They weren't responsible. The gods, has anybody seen the Clash of the Titans? There was an old version and a newer. I haven't seen the new version. I remember the old version. What's that?
The new version is not great.
Nice. Then we'll stick with the old. But in the old one, they had on Mount Olympus, that all the gods, that's where the gods lived. And they had this like little, I don't know, kind of model set of the arena. And on the wall, they had all the clay statues of each figure. Achilles, everybody you can imagine. And you have this scene where they take them off and they put them in the arena. And then it cuts to all of a sudden, Achilles wakes up and there's like some crazy big scorpion coming after the god's cloak, and he has to fight it. Now, notice the imagery there. The gods are controlling everything. There is no human freedom whatsoever. That's why they're saying, "Oh, my muse." Well, that was a beautiful piece of music. How did you come up with that? I didn't. My muse possessed me to, and it was really this type of possession. Has anybody heard of the Oracle of Delphi? The Oracle, which you'll see in the Matrix too. You remember that? Neo has to go see the Oracle. And if you watch the movie, in her kitchen is a sign that is the same sign that is actually above the Oracle of Delphi. Know thyself. Isn't that interesting? And you go to, it was a woman that was in there. And she would get into like a frenzy, what we call like a Bacchic frenzy. Bacchus was a religious cult, kind of a hedonist. They would have these sexual orgies and drunkenness until they became possessed. And they would start, and something inspirational would come out. 2 + 2 = 4. Oh my God! It does work. Oh, they were kind of like that. Well, the Oracle, she would do the same thing. She would get all crazy and start spouting some mad lyrics. And then you go, wow, I've got the prophecy to go out and then find that I become rich, just like the Oracle said that I would. Now, what's interesting is we found out why the Oracle was getting all crazy. We think that we found in the Oracle, or the Temple of Apollo, where the Oracle was, fissures that were leaking noxious gases, nitrous oxide. No, it wasn't nitrous oxide, but it's something like obviously that would have an impact on some type of gas. That could be a possible reason why she was getting high and saying crazy stuff. And maybe half of it ended up being true. Why? Because, well, a broken clock is right how many times a day? Twice. Maybe she was a broken clock. I just thought that was interesting. But they have this concept, we're all determined. Now, that presents a certain issue. If everything's determined, then you can't have knowledge. You can't even have morals. So there was no system of ethics or philosophy or science that was developed because their paradigm, their culture was too primitive. It had not evolved yet to create these kinds of concepts that would be like building the hardware so that you could run the program, the software. They didn't have that. They had to. And if you look, there really is a sort of evolutionary consciousness and cultural evolution that happens over the history of time. And it doesn't just have to be the Stone Age, okay, the Paleolithic Age, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age. It doesn't have to be that, or the Agricultural Age, the Agrarian Society, hunter-gatherers, the different progression that goes up. It doesn't just have to be that, but an evolution of ideas within the culture as a whole. And what's interesting is, as this is happening, it starts to spread around the world, even without context. So it's almost as if the world is evolving to a point of... The other thing that that comes to be out of the great miracle, the Greek miracle, not only philosophy, science, democracy, but those in the myth. See, we're emerging out of the myth when the Presocratics come. What type of religion did the ancient Greeks have? How many gods did they believe in? A bunch. It's all called what? Polytheism. Poly means many. Theism from theos in Greek. So belief in many gods. Guess what happens in the Greek miracle? Monotheism. Monotheism comes. Now, it had been present in the ancient Hebrew culture, but the ancient Hebrews really had very little contact with the Greco world, the ancient Greco world. So that's an argument that it wasn't cross-pollination, but in fact, possibly culture was evolving to move out of polytheism and into monotheistic ideas. Now, for that to happen, certain necessary conditions must have come first to pave the way. And part of that is, if you think everything's determined, then you don't have the freedom to do or not do. It's just determined. And if that's the case, can things really be right or wrong, morally speaking? When the orange falls off the tree, do you say, how bad of it morally? I can't believe it didn't hold on to. Or the rock rolls down the cliff and hits somebody in the head. You might get mad, but is the rock morally culpable? Even when we speak to animals, bad dog, we're being anthropomorphic. They're not morally bad because they operate by instinct. They don't have the freedom and rational calculation to go, well, this is really going to piss off my master. Should I do it? Yep. Burn it down. Do it.
Yeah, but they eventually need to understand.
What's that? They'd have to understand too. And so, although they have intelligence, they don't seem to have the same type of rational understanding that we do, and certainly not moral understanding. So, it's somewhat improper to say bad dog, good dog. You mean you're doing what I want, but they're not morally culpable. We're not going to send animals to jail or put them on the court, right? Up on the witness stand. Yeah. Well, no, it's usually for safety reasons. It's not ever moral. It's not like this is an immoral dog. If somebody thinks that, they're crazy. They haven't taken philosophy. That's what's happened. See what goes wrong when you don't learn philosophy? You start putting dogs down thinking they're immoral. How to save dogs and cats. Philosophy. See how applicable. This is why Immanuel Kant says every ought. Now, if you hear that word, that's a moral imperative. You ought to pick up your room. If your parents told you that, how do you interpret that? That's not a description, right? They're not. Yeah, it's saying this is something that you should do, and if you don't, then it implies you're being immoral and you need a punishment. So every ought implies. Now, can you imagine if you were laid up and you'd broken all your legs and arms, and you're in the, with the thing holding up your, and your parents say, you ought to pick up your room, and you say, I'm not going to be picking up my room. And it would be improper if your parents said, is so immoral. You prodigal son. No, it's like, I can't do it. I can't move. Okay. So what Kant's saying is that every ought implies a can. Morality, the very existence of morality implies freedom. If we weren't free to act, to do or not do, and that's why it comes into law in that way. If somebody holds a gun up to you and your family and says, kick the dog, or I will kill everybody. Are you morally culpable for kicking the dog? No, you're under direct. They have taken your freedom away.
But what if somebody's just like, kill that little kid right there, or I mean, go out to this, or then what do you do?
Yeah, this comes up in ethics as the trolley problem. It won't get too far into what would you do? You could just not enter. I'm not playing. I am not. As soon as I say something or do something, I've entered into the game. Sort of like voting, right? I'm not going to do it. I am not going to play the game.
And then you just choose it in there, like, you don't want to play.
Well, who's responsible? Who would be responsible for this? Can you prevent crazy people from doing crazy stuff? Most of the time, no. So that could be a possible answer. Or if they grabbed you and shot, that would be a better. It's like, I didn't have the freedom to do that. So, okay, we will pick up. What I want to do is talk about the difference, the emergence out of storytelling and the creation or discovery of rational thought and speech as a necessary condition for science and philosophy to take place and how that happened. So I will put the homework reminder up on, I will have you read Parmenides and Heraclitus next. And when we return on Wednesday, then we'll pick up and we'll dig into the Presocratics. But it was important, I think, that we covered all of this stuff. Are there any questions? By the way, you guys are doing a great job. This is a tremendous amount of information to take in at once. I feel your pain. I understand that maybe only a fraction is sinking in. But keep up the good work. Ask me any questions. If you have any difficulties or questions at all, please let me know. And part of this is just repetition. If you ever learn, something on playing music or some type of new technique, do you get it the first time the instructor says all of it? No, you have to practice and over again. I start to get it. It's going to be that sort of process. So that's why I like to kind of do a review at the beginning, go over, and we will continue to revisit these things until pretty soon you'll be up here telling the class how things work. Group presentations, which is really always nice to see, to watch how students go from struggling, grappling with difficult ideas to all of a sudden they've mastered it and you're teaching it in a group presentation. And then you can go outside of the class and start helping teaching other people to think critically, deeply about the truth. Sound good?